Hey everybody, welcome back to another Skeptic Leftist video. Today, we're talking about Andrew Yang again, and the interview he had with Jimmy Dore on the Jimmy Dore Show. Let's take a look at this clip on the issue of a $15 minimum wage. We'll come back and talk about it.
And for a minimum wage, what are you for, the 15 or the 20 or the 25? Are you for one of those?
Well, I'm for 100% for the spirit that no American should be working full time and not be able to pay their bills. But the reality is, if we move to a $15 minimum wage, there are many, many small businesses and industries like fast food that would probably end up getting rid of shifts and workers. Because if you have a fast food restaurant that's paying people $9.25 an hour, and then you say it's 15, then they're going to look around and be like, it's like robot burger flipper time, or it's like self-serve kiosk time, which might be okay. But I'm suggesting that if we put $1,000 a month into people's hands, then that serves as a virtual raise for every worker. It makes workers much harder to exploit. It actually rewards mothers and caregivers who right now a minimum wage would not impact. Like a freedom dividend is much, much broader and bigger, and then we can turn to a minimum wage, but the need for it goes much, much lower because I'm essentially giving everyone $1,000 a month raise, which would raise the effective minimum wage to close to $15 an hour anyway.
So, okay, well, I don't agree with that because, that idea that if we raise people's wages, they'll automate them. They will automate them if they can. They're not doing that because they're nice, right? Or because they would, if they could automate their jobs right now, they would do it right now. And that the only reason
that is generally true.
Yeah,
but it is possible that if you change the economic incentives to automate something, it might become more appealing.
Right. Okay. But I like to bowl. We don't have pin setters anymore. It's not because they tried to get more money for pin setters. Okay.
It is also true too, though, Jimmy, that like if you look at like some struggling mom and pop retailer around the country, like a lot of them are paying their workers like $9-10 an hour, and then if you say, hey, it's $15, like some of them might cut back shifts or some of them might struggle. Like I've run a small private company, and a lot of these small businesses are really, really close to, like the red at any moment in time. Mm-hmm. And something that seems like completely common sense to us, being like, hey, just pay people $15 an hour, mm-hmm. actually would cause some of these businesses to say, you know what, I'm gonna have to cut a shift or cut a worker at the margins. So again, I just rather just give people the raise directly. And I think workers would prefer that too. Yeah. We just put $1,000 a month in your hand.
Yeah. I mean, again, the UBI you're correct on that, and you're incorrect on the other stuff. Businesses hire when there's a demand for their product, end of sentence. And if there's a demand for their product, they got to hire a worker. And nobody's going to go, boy, I have all these orders, but I can't pay that guy $15, so I'm not going to fill them. So that's illogical. That is a right-wing talking point. That is not how economics works.
Businesses are not flourishing at that level. If they're just living hand to mouth, and they don't have the orders, and they have a hard time even paying the people they have, if you elevate those costs, it might in some situations mean they cut shifts or cut workers. I mean, that is not economic theory. That is sound. That is right-wing talking points. But right,
I have a small business. We have 6-7 employees at this place right here. And if I can't afford to pay someone a living wage, I should go out of business. Why should I be able to make a living wage, but the person who generates that income for me doesn't get to have a living wage? That's ridiculous.
That is exactly the way I ran my business too, Jimmy.
Okay, that's good. That is great.
Yang's argument when it came down to the $15 minimum wage, I thought wasn't a great one. But I don't know if it's him playing politics to sort of appease more to a right-wing viewer that might feel like a $15 minimum wage is outrageous, which is, ridiculous. And I don't even think that's the case. I think most of the right wing even supports a $15 minimum wage. So and he sort of gave a complex, at times conflating response. But this was essentially his claim, was that a $15 minimum wage will force fast food companies to automize everything and get rid of the workers. His second claim was that shifts could be drastically cut down if you shift from a $9 to a $15 minimum wage. And here's the rebuttal that I'm going to put forth, is that in Denmark, right, there's McDonald's workers over there too, they're paid $45,000 a year for flipping burgers full time, right? Compared to the whatever 12, 15,000 that an American fast food McDonald's worker would make. So what evidence do you have to cite that increasing the minimum wage, because $45,000 a year, those people are making about $22 an hour, working at McDonald's, right, in Denmark. So where's the evidence to suggest that increasing the minimum wage will then all of a sudden make the employer automize everything, cut shifts dramatically, and fire their entire workforce? There's just no evidence to suggest that. It hasn't happened anywhere. So I would argue that automation within fast food companies occurred to an increase in the minimum wage. It would be horrible PR for those companies. So if those fast food companies decide to do that, it's a PR nightmare. Everyone's gonna hate you. All of your workers are gonna be protesting outside the store. You're gonna get massive nonstop news coverage about the fact that you fired an entire part of the American workforce. It's just not a really plausible argument to say, oh, we shouldn't do 15 because who knows, overnight everyone's job could magically vanish as they decide to automate. Like, that's how a lot of these candidates that put forth that argument, or not candidates, but anybody really, mostly people on the right that put forth that argument, that's the argument they're making, as if overnight everything's going to change and everyone's going to lose their jobs, and it's just not likely based on several different facts. One, that it happened in Denmark, they didn't lose their jobs, they didn't automate. And the other is that, in my opinion, it would be a terrible PR nightmare for those companies to just get rid of their entire workforce. It would be bad. And if you have a progressive in office, a progressive president, then they can really help argue the case and use their power and influence to put pressure, maximum pressure, on these companies to adopt that $15 minimum wage without getting rid of their workforce or massively cutting shifts. So in my opinion, Andrew Yang, this sort of criticism of him not supporting the minimum wage isn't going to be as harsh as other candidates that might have the same opinion, because Andrew Yang is in favor of universal basic income in the form of the freedom dividend. So at the very least, Andrew can argue, well, I may not necessarily be in favor of the $15 minimum wage, but the fact that I'm in favor of universal basic income, essentially putting $1,000 a month in people's hands, will basically get us to a $15 minimum wage. So effectively, I'm in favor of this $15 minimum wage, but literally a $15 minimum wage increase he may not necessarily be in favor of. And he didn't really give a clear answer, so we don't know yet exactly if he's in favor of it or against it. It sounded more just like he was open to the idea, but it wasn't set in stone for him. And then again, what Jimmy said is extremely compelling. He said, quote, "What do you call a system where the wealthiest country on earth renders half of its population poor and low income? A failed system." And that's exactly right. The point is, you've got to reverse these terrible decisions and this sort of horrible economic mentality that a lot of Americans tend to have. And that is a country who is the wealthiest country that this world has ever seen should not have half of its population in poverty. It just shouldn't be the case, especially when they're working full-time, no matter what the job is, whether you're a cashier at Walmart or you're flipping burgers at McDonald's. That you shouldn't die because they're not paying you enough to survive. So, again, really compelling argument. And, at the end of the day, I think this isn't necessarily going to hurt Andrew Yang. I think he just should clarify exactly where he stands on the issue. And again, if he doesn't, the UBI thing helps him politically. But again, I don't think it helps you either politically to come out against the $15 minimum wage. So you let me know what you guys think. A lot of you are part of the Yang gang already. So what do you think? Do you like his answer here? You don't like it? Let me know. For me, I think Andrew Yang is still number 3 in my ranking of the 2020 Democratic candidates, tied with Elizabeth Warren. And this doesn't really help that too much, but we'll see. We'll see what he has to say. He's been all over the place, Andrew Yang, so I'm sure he's going to pop up in a bunch of other interviews in the coming weeks.